You see, the narcissist wasn't born a monster. They were made piece by piece, by rejection, by shame, by a desperate need to feel seen. And while their behavior can cut like glass, beneath all that pride and power is someone who learned that love had conditions. This isn't about excusing them. It's about understanding what built them, so you can finally free yourself from their control. Narcissists aren't born, they're built from deep emotional wounds. Behind every inflated ego, every manipulative tactic, and every need to dominate, there lies a story of pain, a story that often began long before you ever met them. Narcissism isn't born out of abundance, it's born out of deprivation. It's the survival response of someone who learned that love was conditional, that affection had to be earned, and that vulnerability was dangerous. So they adapted. They constructed a version of themselves that looked strong, untouchable, even superior, not because they believed they were better, but because the alternative, feeling small and unseen, was unbearable. Somewhere in their early life, they experienced a deep emotional injury, a parent's rejection, neglect, or harsh criticism. Instead of receiving empathy, they were met with shame. Instead of being told, "You're enough," they were made to feel they had to become something in order to be accepted. That's how the narcissistic mask begins to form. It's a shield that says, if I can't be loved for who I am, then I'll be admired for who I pretend to be. But behind that mask, there's still a wounded inner child, frozen in time, desperate for approval yet terrified of intimacy. Every time someone gets too close, it threatens the illusion of control they've built. Intimacy requires honesty, and honesty risks rejection. So they keep people at arm's length with manipulation, control, or charm. It's not because they enjoy hurting others, it's because connection feels unsafe. They fear being seen, because being seen once meant being shamed. The tragedy is that this defense mechanism, which once protected them, becomes their prison. They crave love but destroy it. They want closeness but fear it. They long for validation but never believe it. No matter how much admiration they receive, it never fills the emptiness inside, because it's not real love they're after. It's proof that they matter. And since they don't truly believe they do, the chase never ends. Understanding this doesn't excuse their behavior. Emelps UMPOWERICNG cycle clearly. When you understand that the narcissist's cruelty often comes from their own unhealed pain, it stops being personal. You stop wondering what's wrong with me and start realizing this isn't about me at all. You begin to detach not out of anger but out of awareness. Compassion may arise, but so does clarity of the kind that says, I can understand your pain, but I can't let it destroy mine. When you look at a narcissist through this lens, you see that beneath the arrogance is insecurity, beneath the control is fear, and beneath the manipulation is a desperate attempt to avoid shame. They were not born to harm, they were conditioned to survive, and while their wounds explain their behavior, they don't justify it. Healing means recognizing the human behind the hurt, understanding where their pain began, and still choosing to walk away when their unhealed trauma starts to wound you. Their confidence is a mask, not a reflection of strength. What we often mistake for power, charm, or self-assurance is actually the armor they've built to survive a lifetime of inner insecurity. The narcissist's grandiosity, their need to dominate conversations, to be admired, to appear flawless. None of it comes from true confidence. It comes from fear, fear of being seen as ordinary, fear of being wrong, fear of being forgotten. Deep down, the narcissist doesn't believe in their own worth, so they create an illusion of superiority to keep that truth hidden from both themselves and others. Real confidence is quiet, it's grounded, it comes from knowing who you are, from accepting both your strengths and your flaws. But a narcissist's version of confidence is loud, fragile, and easily threatened. It needs constant reinforcement through attention, admiration, and control. The moment that admiration stops flowing, the illusion begins to crack, and when it cracks, so does the person behind it. That's why they lash out, why they belittle others, why they need to be right at any cost. Every challenge feels like a threat to the identity they've constructed. In truth, they're terrified of being seen for who they really are, insecure, fearful, uncertain. So they hide behind an image, the successful one, the attractive one, the intelligent one, the morally superior one. They build a facade so convincing that sometimes even they begin to believe it, but the mask always needs maintenance. It requires endless attention and constant performance. That's why narcissists are drawn to admiration like moths to a flame. It feeds the illusion that they're enough, but it's never enough, because no amount of external validation can fix what was broken internally. When you look closely, you'll notice how defensive they become at the slightest criticism. A truly confident person can handle feedback because their sense of self isn't dependent on perfection. But the narcissist interprets feedback as rejection, disagreement as disrespect, and boundaries as betrayal. To them, any reminder that they're not flawless feels unbearable. Their entire identity depends on the illusion of superiority, so they will protect it, even if it means hurting others. But here's the deeper truth. Behind that arrogance is deep shame, a shame so heavy that their entire personality structure was built to avoid it. The charm, the confidence, the grand gestures, all of it is a distraction from the quiet voice inside that whispers, "You're not enough." And until that voice is faced, no amount of admiration will silence it. Understanding this can shift your perspective. You stop envying them or fearing them. You start seeing the pattern for what it is survival. Their confidence isn't strength, it's scaffolding built over a deep wound. True strength doesn't demand attention or control. It doesn't need to prove itself. It simply is. And when you understand that difference, you stop chasing their approval because you realize that the mask they wear is not a reflection of power, but a desperate attempt to hide their pain. Validation is their oxygen. For a narcissist, admiration is not just a desire, it's a lifeline. It's the thing that keeps their fragile sense of self intact. Every compliment, every bit of attention, every sign of approval becomes the air they breathe. Without it, their carefully constructed image begins to collapse, revealing the emptiness they spend their entire lives trying to escape. What looks like confidence or self-love on the outside is, in truth, deep dependency. They don't feel real unless someone else confirms it for them. From the moment they wake up, the narcissist is scanning their environment for signs of validation. Who's watching? Who's praising? Who's noticing? It's not vanity, it's survival. They built their identity around how others perceive them because somewhere in their early life, they learned that love was not unconditional. Love came with performance. It came with doing, achieving, impressing. They learned that to be seen, they had to shine, and that being ordinary was not enough. Over time, they replaced authenticity with approval. They stopped asking, "Who am I?" and started asking, "Who do you need me to be so I'm accepted?" But the tragedy is that validation never lasts. The moment the praise fades, the emptiness returns. That's why narcissists often cycle through relationships, careers, and achievements so quickly. They are constantly chasing that next high, the next moment that makes them feel significant. It's not greed, it's desperation. Validation is their emotional oxygen tank, but it leaks. No matter how much they take in, it's never enough to fill the void. This need for validation also explains their sensitivity to criticism. A single negative comment can send them spiraling because it punctures the illusion of perfection they work so hard to maintain. What feels like a simple disagreement to you feels like annihilation to them. When someone withdraws admiration, sets a boundary, or simply stops playing along with their performance, the narcissist panics. They'll resort to manipulation, guilt, or even rage to regain that control, not because they want to dominate you, but because without your validation, they feel like they're disappearing. It's a sad irony. The more they chase external approval, the further they drift from the real self that could actually bring peace. True self-worth comes from within, from being able to sit with imperfection and still feel enough. But narcissists never developed that internal foundation. Their worth was outsourced long ago. Every glance, every compliment, every like or comment becomes a tiny piece of who they are. Without it, they feel hollow. Understanding this doesn't mean you should feed their need for validation. It means you can step back and see the pattern clearly. You realize that their praise seeking isn't arrogance, it's addiction. And like all addictions, it consumes everything around it. The best thing you can do is detach with awareness, to know that you cannot fill a void that was never yours to fill. Because while validation may be their oxygen, it doesn't have to be your cage. Boundaries feel like rejection to them. To a narcissist, the simple act of saying no, of standing firm, of protecting your peace, feels like abandonment. It triggers something ancient within them, an old wound that says, "If you're not giving me what I want, you don't love me." Most people can accept limits and still feel secure in connection, but narcissists can't. Their entire sense of safety depends on control, and your boundaries remind them that they don't have it. That loss of control, even over something small, reawakens their deepest fear, being powerless, unwanted, and unseen. When you say, "I can't do this right now," they don't hear a boundary, they hear rejection. When you ask for space, they interpret it as punishment. When you stop explaining yourself, they see it as betrayal. It's not because they don't understand logic, it's because emotionally they live in a world where love equals compliance. To them, love should bend, accommodate, and never refuse. They see your independence not as a healthy expression of self, but as proof that they are losing significance. In childhood, many narcissists grew up with caregivers who were emotionally unavailable or inconsistent, parents who only gave attention when the child performed, pleased, or obeyed. Boundaries in that environment meant loss. Saying no meant punishment or withdrawal. So as adults, when someone sets a boundary, it stirs that same fear. They don't consciously think, "I'm being rejected," but their body remembers the feeling. They panic. They push harder. They might guilt trip you, accuse you of being selfish, or suddenly switch from charm to rage. All of it is an attempt to regain emotional control and soothe the terror of being cut off. That's why setting boundaries with a narcissist feels like walking through a storm. You're not just dealing with their current frustration, you're awakening their buried wounds. Every no you speak challenges the illusion that they are the center of your world. They don't see your boundary as balance, they see it as betrayal, but you must remember, your boundary is not cruelty. It's clarity. You are not responsible for how they interpret it. Over time, you begin to see the pattern. The more you try to explain your boundaries, the more they twist your words. The more you defend your limits, the more they make you feel guilty for having them. The goal isn't to convince them to understand, it's to stay anchored in your truth, even when they refuse to respect it. Boundaries are not walls. They are doors, doors that define where you end and they begin. And for someone who has built their identity on control, those doors feel like rejection. But they are also your protection. You cannot heal in a relationship that punishes your autonomy. Boundaries will not destroy love, they will reveal whether it was love to begin with. And though the narcissist may see them as rejection, they are, in truth, your greatest act of self-respect. Understanding isn't the same as excusing. That single truth can set you free when you've been entangled with a narcissist. So many empathetic souls fall into the trap of believing that if they can just understand the narcissist's pain, their trauma, their childhood wounds, their fears, then they can somehow save them. They confuse compassion with tolerance and forgiveness with permission. But understanding why someone hurts you doesn't make the hurt any less real. You can see the story behind their behavior without allowing that story to keep rewriting yours. It's natural to want to make sense of it. Narcissists leave you questioning everything you're worth, your reality, your memory. So when you begin to learn about their psychology, it feels like relief. They're not evil, they're wounded. You think, and that's true, but it's only half of the truth. The other half is this: being wounded doesn't give anyone the right to wound others. Their pain may explain their behavior, but it never justifies their cruelty. You can hold empathy for their brokenness and still hold firm to your boundaries. Understanding the narcissist means seeing the layers, the child who was unseen, the adult who learned to manipulate, the human who built armor out of arrogance. But compassion must have balance, or it becomes self-destruction. You can acknowledge their past without excusing their present. You can wish them healing without staying in harm's way. That's the fine line that every survivor of narcissistic abuse must walk, the line between seeing their humanity and protecting your own. True understanding is not about staying, it's about clarity. It allows you to step back and say, I see where this comes from, but I won't carry it anymore. It allows you to release resentment without surrendering your boundaries. You don't have to hate them to let them go. You just have to love yourself enough to stop trying to fix what they refuse to face. Because the narcissist's healing is not your responsibility, it never was. Excusing them keeps you in the cycle. It tells your nervous system that love means suffering, that empathy means endurance, that forgiveness means forgetting. But real healing breaks that pattern. It says, I can understand your pain and still say no. It says, I can have compassion and still walk away. That's what emotional maturity looks like, not endless forgiveness, but discernment. When you separate understanding from excusing, you reclaim your power. You no longer feel guilty for setting limits. You stop apologizing for protecting your peace. You begin to see that empathy is a gift, but it must include yourself. Because compassion without boundaries isn't love, it's self-abandonment. So yes, understand the narcissist. See their pain, their fear, their fragility, but never let that understanding become a cage. You can see the wound without becoming its caretaker. You can understand them deeply and still choose freedom. Healing means seeing the human behind the hurt and still choosing yourself. This is one of the hardest lessons you'll ever learn after being entangled with a narcissist. When you begin to understand their pain, their childhood wounds, their shame, their need for control, part of you feels compassion. You see the brokenness under the cruelty. You recognize that they weren't born toxic. They became that way to survive. And for a moment, that realization can soften your anger. But true healing doesn't stop at understanding them. It continues by returning your focus to yourself. Because no matter how much empathy you hold, your healing cannot come from fixing theirs. Seeing the human behind the hurt means looking beyond the mask of manipulation and recognizing that they too are a product of pain. It means realizing that their arrogance hides fear, that their cruelty hides shame, and that their control hides insecurity. When you see that clearly, you begin to detach emotionally. You stop personalizing their actions. You understand that what they did to you wasn't about you, it was about their unhealed wounds. This awareness brings peace because you no longer carry their behavior as your burden, but still, compassion has limits. Healing doesn't mean going back. It doesn't mean tolerating mistreatment because you understand where it comes from. It means acknowledging their humanity without sacrificing your own. You can wish them healing from afar, but your responsibility is to protect your own heart. Choosing yourself after narcissistic abuse is not selfish, it's survival. You are reclaiming the energy that was once spent trying to please, fix, or earn love from someone who was incapable of giving it freely. At first, choosing yourself feels foreign. You've spent so long trying to manage their moods, anticipate their reactions, and keep the peace that self-prioritization feels wrong. But healing is learning to stand in your worth again. It's recognizing that your empathy was never the problem. It was your lack of boundaries that left you unguarded. Seeing the human behind the hurt helps you release resentment, but choosing yourself helps you rebuild strength. The two together create balance, understanding without attachment, forgiveness without reconciliation. There comes a moment in every survivor's journey when they realize that compassion and closure can exist without contact. You can look back at the narcissist story with empathy and still walk away without guilt. You don't need revenge, validation, or apologies to heal. You just need truth. The truth that you are allowed to love yourself more than you pity someone else's pain. Healing in its purest form is choosing peace over chaos, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over attachment. It's seeing the narcissist not as a monster, but as a mirror, one that reflected back all the places where you forgot your own worth. And when you finally choose yourself, you close that chapter not with bitterness, but with wisdom. You understand the human behind the hurt, and you set both of you free.